Another exciting aspect of being virtual is also our new interactive agenda. So as you go out throughout the day, we encourage you to click on the names of presenters or agencies. Many of these will be hyperlinked, and it will take you to a website where you can learn more about our guest. To make Children's Advocacy Days accessible to participants that may be unable to hear or have difficulty hearing, we have enabled our closed caption. If you'd like to remove closed captions, there's a small box in the bottom of your screen that provides you that option. One of the things that we've learned this year is that no matter how much you prepare, technology is not always your friend. We are hoping and expecting a day free of any glitches, but we ask in advance for your grace and patience as we navigate any unexpected challenges that may arise. And speaking of technology, I want to take this time to introduce and thank Rachel Moore-Beard from Strategy and Leadership. She and her company have been so incredible in helping organize this virtual event. Thank you, Rachel, for all of your help leading up to Children's Advocacy Days and all the work you will do throughout. And now I am excited to welcome our first guest of the day, Commissioner Jennifer Nichols with the Department of Children's Services. I worked with Commissioner Nichols on the Second Look Commission, and I'm glad she is joining us today. Commissioner Nichols was appointed by Governor Bill Lee in January of 2019 as the new commissioner of DCS. Prior to joining DCS, Commissioner Nichols served in the DA's office of Shelby County for more than 20 years. During her time there, part of her time there, she served as the chief prosecutor over Special Victims Unit. There she supervised and handled child homicides, child physical abuse, child sexual abuse, elder abuse, and many other special projects. Throughout her career, Commissioner Nichols has been a strong advocate for those who experience abuse. Commissioner Nichols, we are super excited to hear from you, and I will turn it over to you now, Commissioner Nichols.
Good morning, everyone. I love Child Advocacy Days, and I think I love this meeting, this convening more than most, because I feel like I'm your people, you're my people, and that we are all on the same page when it comes to children and how to best serve those that don't have a voice. And it's interesting, the year before last, sort of comparing what my message was that day to today, it's a good bit different. And yet, because we are still serving children, there's so many things that victims and however they come to us need our help. And I want to give you a few slides and stats, but I'm not going to do that first. I'm going to do that in the middle of two personal stories, and I'm going to do that while keeping an eye on the clock because I don't want to run behind. I want to tell you this morning about a young man who came into the custody of Department of Children's Services at the age of 15. He was committed to our custody after having been found delinquent by a judge on the charges of aggravated robbery, which for those of you who might not know, that's robbery with a gun or with a weapon, deadly weapon, and car theft and a vehicle chase called evading arrest. And with those three felonies, he came into custody. And just at the backstory of that crime was that a man reported being robbed at gunpoint by four teenagers, two of whom had a gun and a gun to his face, and he was robbed of his car, his wallet, his cell phone, and he reported it immediately, of course, was able to give us the description of his own car, and the police located his car a very short time later, and there was a high-speed chase which resulted in these youth crashing the car. This particular young man, they all ran, but this young man was caught. I think three of them were, and as I said, eventually was committed to the department. He had a determinate sentence, which means that he was going to be with our department until the age of 19. and he was actually sent to Wilder there in Fayette County for that period of time. And it is reported that he was, for some reason, picked on once he got to that facility. And he was offered many times whether he wanted to be in like a protective custody environment. And he didn't want to, in his words, because he didn't want to be perceived as weak. So he just plugged along. But the interesting thing about this kid who started with such a less maybe hopeful beginning was that he immediately got in school and started taking advantages of the programs that were offered. And 4 months after coming to us at Wilder, he, in addition to the services and the school, he had started going to church there in chapel, and he underwent a spiritual evolution and ended up giving his story in the form of a talk to the other youth that were at Wilder, and there was sort of a transformation in how this kid was perceived. So picking on him stopped. He sort of became a leader at Wilder, and it was interesting to watch because he also enrolled in a barbering program under the instruction of a certified instructor that we had there. And he worked part-time at that school as a master barber because he was logging so many hours. He also received his high-set diploma, meaning he might not have had the same educational track that some kids might have, but he was smart enough to study and pass it. If you were outside you might call that a GED, but so he got his high-set diploma. And so after he got his diploma, he started working full-time at his choice with this barber, to the point where there were youth there who would not let the actual barber do their hair because they said this kid kept them on point. He participated in what we call a transition program, meaning he applied to attend TCAT, which is Tennessee College of Applied Technology. He ended up getting enough hours to where when it came time for his release, he was only 200 hours short of being an actual certified barber. When he left custody, we had set him up with the owner of a barbershop and who agreed to take him under his wing as an apprentice so that he could finish getting his hours, and then the man was going to hire him there full time. When he left Wilder, he left with his selective service card, a voter registration form, his high-set diploma, and a transcript of that, the barbering clocked hours showing that he had completed that program. Yeah, he left with a federal student aid summary, his TCAT information and application summary, and his counselor information. He left with, he also had an interest in perhaps driving a forklift. Well, he had talked and sort of been mentored by a forklift driver before he left, and he left with that man's name and information, and he left with a laptop and a carrying case. When we look at how hopeful his transition to the community is, it just dawned on me, this is everything that we want for youth. Because remember, DCS, we have kids that come in as drug exposed infants that are hours old, all the way to youth like this kid who came in at 15 and was going to stay with us for 4 years. It's exciting when kids that are juvenile justice involved take advantage and are able to leave with a new course set up and the tools to hopefully take that. It was interesting because, so that you know, he was just released a couple of days ago. And our new deputy commissioner over juvenile justice, Darren Goods, had an opportunity to meet with him beforehand and sort of talk to him one-on-one. And Mr. Goods was able to handpick an incredible mentor in the area, in the county, the town this kid is from, that was basically going to be waiting for him when he got back home. And in addition to that mentor and the barber apprenticeship that was literally waiting on him to show up there this week, it's everything that we could possibly hope for this kid. I'm not by any stretch saying that all of our youth, I guess, leave with these tools. We got to keep trying, and we certainly can't give up. So also, I want to, as I said, share with you some stats. So if we can start the PowerPoint now, that'd be great. Next slide, please. So with the youth that I just described, I think our mission and our vision becomes even more important because, you know, our mission is to provide high quality prevention and support services to children and families that promote safety, permanency, and well-being. And when you read that, you might wonder, or just kind of think towards, maybe that goes more towards dependent and neglected children. It really doesn't. It goes exactly towards our juvenile justice involved children, because we want prevention for further activity with law enforcement and our department. We want to provide support to them so that when they get out, they are safe, they have a permanent place to stay, and they are thriving because of their well-being. And our vision, of course, is to create those environments for youth where they can live either with supportive families, in this case, an engaged community. And if we do that, if we do that, we've done what we should, we've done what we want to do. Next slide, please. So just very, very briefly, we'll spend 5 seconds on this one. For those of you who aren't as familiar with our department, you know that we have offices in 95 counties. We've split our state into 12 regions, and we have today about 3,500 employees. If anybody knows anybody that's looking for a job, we have some vacancies, so please apply and please keep a watch. Next slide, please. So as of the 10th, we have 8,849 children in DCS custody, as opposed to a year ago when we had 9,300. Of our 8,800 children in custody today, we have them divided between those in foster care and those that are juvenile justice involved. And you see that we have 8,200 in foster care, 596 that are juvenile justice involved, as compared to this time last year when we had 854. So that's been a trend since the pandemic, when courts were not up and running as they were before, and perhaps when courts were less likely to commit children to our custody due to the pandemic. But you can see we're down, what's that, about 250 youth in our juvenile justice population. Next slide. I asked for the total number of hotline calls because you saw that our custody numbers went down. So we compared cases assigned and calls handled for 2019 versus 2020. And the bottom line is calls that were handled in 2019 were 118,600, and calls handled last calendar year were 103,000. We're down about 15% in calls and cases assigned. Next slide, please. And while we're waiting on that, of course, those numbers, custody numbers going down, we know that there was a decrease in calls because kids weren't in school, kids weren't playing sports on teams, they weren't going to, clubs and classes and parties the way that they normally would. So less eyes on the children resulted nationwide as fewer calls called in. I wanted you to see some stats directly related to our juvenile justice and where these kids are told you there were 596 in custody. So 363 of those youth are in either staff secured congregate care facilities or in foster care. Staff secured being different, of course, than a hardware secure facility, which is frankly where we have razor wire and less movement, more security. So we have 134 youth in a hardware secure facility, and the teenager I told you about at Wilder, of course, would have been in that population. We have 43 that are currently on a trial home visit. And what that means is they have finished their program, they have worked their program, and are sent home for 30 days to see how things go. If they don't pick up any more charges, aren't rearrested, and things go well, they remain out of custody of what we call aftercare, which we'll talk about in a minute. Aftercare means they are no longer in DCS custody, but yet a judge in their county wants us to keep an eye on them. So we're still checking on them, even though they're not in our custody. And it's our responsibility to report if there's a problem. And that aftercare is supposed to officially last an additional 60 days. But sometimes we have judges that keep youth on aftercare for a number of reasons. And we have kids on aftercare for as much as a year or two sometimes. We have 51 youth in detention, and that's a detention center around the country, around the state. And we contract with about 7, I think there are 13 detention centers total across the state. And what that is youth go there maybe upon arrest while they're waiting placement. Generally doesn't last very long. And then of our 596, we currently have 5 youth that are on runaway status. And they are not on runaway status from the hardware secure facilities. They are on runaway status from staff secured place right now. Meaning, so staff secured, as I said, was different than a hardware, meaning was not determined that they needed that level of security. And for the most part, if a youth is determined to run away from a staff secured facility, they can. Luckily, most stay and work the program, but we currently have 5 on runaway. So that's where our 596 custodial JJ youth are. Don't forget, we have 783 that are on probation, and we have 178 that are on that aftercare that I described to you a minute ago, meaning they were custodial, they worked the program, they were released from wherever they are, they got out, did a trial home visit, were successful, and now they're on the period from the 31st day through whenever a judge releases them. Our total non-custodial JJ involved youth, nearly 1,000 right now. Next slide. And we have 3 hardware secure facilities. Wilder that I mentioned, there in Somerville, Fayette County, we have 90 youth there. There are about 120 beds, but because our numbers are down right now across the board, we have 90 youth there. We also have one, that's in West Tennessee. We also have Mountain View in East Tennessee, which is Jefferson County. And they have 34 youth, and that's about the max they can take at this time. Then we have a third one called Hollis Residential. This is our only hardware secure facility for females. And we have 10 young ladies there right now. I think they take a maximum of 11 or 12. So that's a total of 134 that are in one of the 3 hardware secure facilities. Next slide, please. All right, so with hearing about the child I told you about and seeing what our numbers look like, I wanted to talk to you about one more child. This one was from East Tennessee. And really, I just kind of want to end with this because you've seen how the services work, the education's available, and we are able to sometimes, I think, transform a youth's future by, at least for those who want it and who are interested in taking advantage. So this other child that I want to talk to you about was committed to the Department of Children's Services also at the age of 18, and again for crimes of aggravated and facilitated robbery and a violation of probation. He also had theft of property, evading arrest, drug paraphernalia, a number of different charges, all by the age of 15. He was gang affiliated and led to many of his prior charges and frankly, some poor choices that he made. When he was first came into custody, he disrupted, meaning they wouldn't keep him anymore because of his at least 4 different residential treatment programs, all because of his behavior and lack of process or progress in the treatment. When he got out of one, there were new criminal charges facing him, and then he was sentenced to a determinate sentence, just like the first youth, meaning judge said he's going to stay there with you in a hardware secure facility until he's 19. At that time, as soon as he got there, he seemed to, for the first time, start working the program, and he made significant progress with his treatment goals, his behavior plan, and his education. And probably about 8 or 9 months after he got there, with the assistance of the educational staff there, he was able to obtain his high school diploma. You all know that's huge. It makes all the difference in the world for youth who stays in this program and gets out without that high school diploma. So he got it. He started, continued to work his program. And what was done for him, Mountain View has a step down sort of program. So he was able to exit Mountain View. So even though the hardware secure facility, so even though we were going to have him till he was 19, he stepped down to another program in a different town, became gainfully employed by a company in that community. And he continues now to save his salary for a fresh start once he gets out. So he is paid the same salary that other youth would be paid. He is scheduled for release in a few days, and he has not attended the TCAT, but he's also signed up for it, and he's also signed up for life set services upon his release, which means he will have a mentor. We contract with youth villages actually to provide that, and this young man will receive all the life set services, which are things that help him apply for school, for training, for teaching him how to do a checkbook, teaching how to budget, about everything you do. Life set is exactly what it says it is. And we're just, it's youth like the first one, fella that I told you about, and this kid, that give us all the reason to continue doing what we're doing. Because when you can change a kid's mindset, show him what is possible, they want that. And these two are just one of many who actually take advantage of the programs and the opportunities. And I don't know, I just sort of wanted to tell you something positive about our JJ youth. And with my history of being a career prosecutor and then a criminal court judge, this is about refreshing and resetting and sort of taking a different approach. I got to tell you, there were times in my career, my previous career, when I might not have had the same attitude that I have, because I wasn't exposed to youth like I am now, that truly seek for a different life and are striving to achieve it. And with that, I will turn it back over to Craig, and thank you all for letting me be here today.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Nichols, and thank you for some of those personal stories. They're incredibly important for us to hear about some of the success stories. And so we're so glad that you shared those with us. Now I'm excited to introduce our Youth Justice panel. We have 3 guests who are going to join us today and talk about some of the challenges and opportunities within the youth justice system. I am well pleased to welcome the highly acclaimed Stacy Miller, Stacy Miller is an ADA attorney in the 20th Judicial District. She serves as a team leader for the Office of the District Attorney of Nashville. She, most notably to me, mentored me while we were both at DCS and gave me some real opportunities to grow and become the advocate that I am now. She is certified as a specialist in juvenile child welfare law. Next on the panel, we have the wise and sage Judge Dwight Stokes. Judge Stokes has been on the bench since 1998 as the Sevier County General Sessions and Juvenile Court Judge. Prior to being a judge, he practiced criminal and civil law in Sevier County. He served on the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth for 9 years, so glad to have him back. He and I toured the state, talked about disproportionate minority contact. I was the opening act and he was the main act. He also serves on the Tennessee Board of Judicial Conduct. The last panelist, but certainly not the least, we have the zealous, compassionate, skillful Dr. Bernard Williams. Dr. Williams has worked in residential treatment, community mental health organizations, mentoring programs, schools. Now he works with the Memphis and Shelby County Juvenile Court as the Chief Probation Officer Administrator of the Children's Bureau at Juvenile Court. His love for youth and skills for the work are unparalleled. And now we're going to get into some of the questions, or not some of the questions with our panelists. And I believe I will start with Stacy Miller. And so when discussing the youth justice reforms and ways to improve the system, diversion is always part of that conversation. So what does diversion entail? What are some of the benefits? What type of offenses are typically eligible for diversion? And then tell us a little bit about what's going on in Davidson County.
Okay. Well, Craig, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm happy to be here with Judge Stokes and Dr. Williams, our wonderful panel members. And I appreciate the nice things you said about me, Craig. You're a great guy and you are a great advocate. And we appreciate what you do every day. In terms of diversion, I think it's really, really important. And I'm so glad that the commissioner opened up with her success stories, because there are kids that get in our system and there are ways for them to get out of our system. There are ways for them to be successful. But ideally, if we can, if it's a lower level offense, if we can divert them from our system, that's really the best thing to do. And that's not just based on gut instinct or what we'd like to see. It's based on the statistics. In general, if we can provide multifaceted community-based services, that's going to keep a kid out of the system, and it's going to be more successful, not just for that youth and their family, but also for our community safety. When we formally process youth, when they come into our system, as Dr. Williams, the judge and commissioner know, that's very expensive. It's a lot of money for the state and federal government, and it puts a kid into our system, and once they're in, it's really harder for them to get out. So all of the research tells us that it reduces recidivism if we can keep kids out of the system. So what do we start with? Well, in Davidson County, for about the past 6 years, we have been looking at low-level offenses. And I have a PowerPoint. I'm not going to go through it because it would take too long. But I think it is going to be sent to the participants here so people can take a look at it. But I do want to share just one page of it. So I'm going to share my screen for just a minute, if that's okay. Okay, let's see. So this is actually these are the charges. This is actually slide, I think 8 or 9 on our PowerPoint. And these are the ones that we go ahead and do an automatic divert. So when a youth comes to us in Davidson County with a criminal trespass, curfew violation, disorderly conduct, these lower level charges, we will go ahead and do an automatic divert. There is a team of folks at juvenile court that then will make phone calls, offer services. Our police also have a youth services division. And so we have the ability to offer help without bringing the youth into the system. And I just wanted people to kind of see that it's really easy to go ahead and come up with this list. And this is based on research specifically that these are the kinds of charges that if a youth commits these offenses, they're very unlikely to be dragged back into the system if we provide them some kind of service intervention. And as Commissioner Nichols talked about mentorship, a lot of kids just need that one person in their life that can intervene with them and give them that attention that they need to get them back on track. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
You, sir.
Thank you. And so, Dr. Williams, the next question is for you, sir. So we see how diversion is a vital tool in the youth justice system. Tell us about some proactive diversionary practices that are being implemented in Shelby County.
I think we heard on yesterday, Dr. Siegel kind of talked about integration, and that integration is within various departments, intergovernmental departments, such as our Shelby County District Attorney, Memphis Police Department, and Juvenile Court. We placed 3 of our counselors at various police precincts with Memphis Police Department, and we integrated. We went upstream, and we're at the police precincts and in our DA's office, our district attorney's office, and our counselor are able to problem solve with Memphis Police Department anytime they come in contact with a youth. And particularly, just as Stacy Miller indicated, a lot of these low-level misdemeanor offenses, we're able to catch at the community level, but not only intercept those things, but we're also able to, decrease a lot of transports to our detention facility, but we're able to solve those things at the community level without a police report ever being written. And I think the most important part about this type of diversion is it keeps the kid out of the system. And we know a lot of the disproportionate minority contact, but it also gives those kids an opportunity to get reconnected with some services that they didn't even realize that were already in their community. So, and a lot of those things are mental health, mentoring, vocational trainings, that some of those things are right around the corner, gang intervention, and even employment. But I would even say this: we've been working diligently with administrative officers of the courts to be trained and in a way with the CANS assessment, that is the Child Adolescent Needs and Strength Assessment, where we can assess that child as well at that level to have a snapshot of what type of services we need to get them connected to in the community. So those are just some of the things that we do. And we want to be well-rounded, making sure that we connect that kid back to the community so they can solve those problems.
Outstanding. Good, excellent work being done across the state. Now I will turn my attention to Judge Stokes. Judge Stokes, you've heard some things and some new innovative strategies regarding diversion within the youth justice system. I know you've been at this for a while, and so I'd really like to ask you, what are some of the greatest needs that you see within the youth justice system?
First off, I do want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here. The years that I was on the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, that was really the highlight of the years I've been on the bench. The leaders that I've met through the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth have been outstanding. They're dedicated public servants who work every day to address issues to make life better for children and youth and for families all across our state. And people I've met through the years have been such great resources, like Richard Kennedy and Linda O'Neill, Ron King, Craig Hargrow, Sunita Keller, Gerald Papica, Vicki Taylor, Zanira Whitfield, Deborah Stafford, Steve Petty, many of you still working with the commission, and many others, but just people that greatly impact the health and safety and well-being of children and youth. And that's what really gives me hope going forward, is to have a forum like this where you can involve people from the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and let them see what the issues are, give them an opportunity to have input. Listening to fellow panelists today, I'm really impressed by what they're saying about the diversion and how important that is. I think that's a really key thing. I'd like to just address a good bit of time with to the issue about the equity and fairness and achieving that in our system. Is that okay with you? And as you know, I've tried to give this a high priority through the years. We've had our opportunity to go through the state, and that was always exciting. You're such a great leader, a great companion to be around. You have such so many experiences that you can enrich my experiences by, because I don't have to come from the same backgrounds, and so to have that has been a wonderful thing. I do like to use the theme seeking justice for all, one child at a time, as you know, and I join with my fellow panelists in emphasizing that every participant in the juvenile justice system should be, in his or her profession, primarily to seek the best interest of all children, and to use preventative measures to keep children and youth out of the juvenile justice system, like they've been talking about. But I wanted to ask this: how can we address issues of fairness and equity in our juvenile justice system and our courts of law across the United States? Since we have a very brief time, let me just make a few key points. One is we must treat all people coming into our system of justice as being people of worth, people who are valued by our courts, people whose rights are fully recognized by our system of justice. This means that all people in our court system, judges, district attorneys, defense attorneys, youth service officers, probation officers, magistrates, teachers, educators, service providers, police officers, everyone must understand, and this is really the key issue I feel like that I would like to address, and that's must understand that our nation has a very blemished and tarnished and violent history in its treatment of people of color, African Americans, Black and brown people. For decade after decade, law enforcement officers and people in authority such as governors, mayors, judges, and sheriffs have deprived people of color of their rights, their freedoms, their very lives. Sometimes very blatantly, as in past years, and sometimes more discreetly, as we see more today. Without a true recognition of this horrific fact, I think it's difficult to address issues of fairness and equity in any meaningful way. We're in the midst of a period of time in our nation where so many people in a position of power seem to want to deny the facts of just how disgraceful our history has been. And that's not productive in us trying to have a good system. The deprivation of the right to vote, the denial of the right to a quality education for decades, the denial of ability of people of color to engage in free commerce and access to all service, abuse of people of color by law enforcement, and having an unfair justice system that greatly needs to be changed. The deprivation of ability to seek redress of grievances that went on for people of color for so many years, or to have a reasonable ability to even protest injustice. But I want to say that all citizens in our nation have a right to a government and a legal system which respects them, which provides a system of due process, which promotes the dignity and worth of each person, which gives people a voice and an opportunity to be heard, which provides them with legal representation which is meaningful and knowledgeable of the specific facts of their case, and that the attorney has a true understanding of the client, and honestly cares about the best interest of their clients. A system which provides a judge who is impartial, but one that should be caring and compassionate about achieving a just outcome and truly seeking justice in each situation. Where prosecutors are knowledgeable and understanding of the purposes of the juvenile justice system, that it's to be a benevolent force which truly desires to reach a just resolution. Where people are held accountable, in a system which understands that it must be proclaimed over and over that Black lives really do matter. And the reason I'm saying that is that our nation has never really made it clear through our system of justice and through our government that Black lives matter. And we must demand that judges and law enforcement and school authorities and teachers, probation officers and legislators pause and reflect upon this. That our nation has screamed out all during our history, including a dark history of slavery, that Black lives do not matter. During a history of Jim Crow laws, and we've cried out that Black lives do not matter. When we had public lynchings where white people gathered in droves in church clothes and brought their children, that declared to people for decades that Black lives did not matter. When we had deacons that were assigned to meet Black people at the doors of churches and say, "You're not welcome here and you can't come in," that was conveying to people that Black lives do not matter. When you had unequal schools and separate restrooms and drinking fountains, that was decades of proclaiming that Black lives do not matter. when you had incidents like what happened to Emmett Till and the battering and the brutal death, and then the mockery of justice that took place. That was proclaiming that Black lives do not matter. So we have this history that screams out, and I'll bring this to a close with my comments, but so how can we achieve fairness and equity in our juvenile justice system in light of a history? And I would just suggest that one of our key challenges is to have a day of accountability in our court system when judges and court administrators and people who have run our systems for many years can finally say, hey, we are sorry. We need a system where we can start over. We're willing to listen. Tell us what we can do. Tell us what we can do better. You know, indeed, such a accountability is taking place across the nation with task forces that are presenting some reports. Like there's one that's which is excellent with the North Carolina task force. This is a multi-page document that talks about how law enforcement can be trained to be community enforcers and friends in communities, and page after page of what we can go through to have better training for law enforcement and for others. But let me close with two quotes, and then I'll finish these thoughts. But David Carey, in his excellent book with Liberty and Justice for Some, says this. And this is what I think is the main thing about our court systems and the main challenges. The minimum that this nation should require, he says, from its courts and government at all levels, is that they carefully question and scrutinize any governmental measures that harm minorities, that harm poor people, that they reject implausible or phony justifications, and that they refrain from covering up racism. And secondly, as I close, in Prisoners of Hope, Cornel West says, we need a moral prophetic minority of all colors, a group of people coming together, even a small group, who muster the courage to question the powers that be, the courage and to have the courage to be impatient with evil, but patient with people in our system, and the courage to fight for social justice. And he says, our courage rests on a deep democratic vision of a better world that lures us and a blood-drenched hope that sustains us. And I think that we as judges, we as people that are involved in the system, we all need to expend our own blood, our own sweat, our own tears to right the ship of democracy, of justice in our nation today in our court system. So I'll let the others chime in, but I just wanted to say that that's my part about the issue about equity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge Stokes. I believe you preach more than in 5 or 10 minutes than I have all year, and I'm a pastor, man.
I know that's not true. I've heard you
That's
preach.
right.
Well, thank you so much.
I was about to break out into a dance right there for you.
and so everything you said is so true, and I want to touch on several things, but one thing that really leads me to my next question to Stacy Miller, is you talked about how prosecutors and other individuals really need to understand the system. And so to you, Stacy, we understand that, while some things have changed, others remain the same. We understand juvenile court is a highly specialized court. It's established in 1899, primarily based on the knowledge that children who commit delinquent acts are different from adults. But as a class, they are less blameworthy and have a greater capacity for change. And so now we have distinct criminal justice systems and distinct youth justice systems based on that understanding. So juvenile court is a highly specialized court. What are some steps that juvenile court practitioners, service providers, everyone within the system, what are some steps that they can take and to operate as best they can within this highly specialized system?
Well, thank you, Craig. I want to say to Judge Stokes, amen, hallelujah, that you to say that was fabulous. And it's so true. Those of us in the system, we have got to bear the responsibility of trying to take a system that is inherently disparate, is inherently unfair. We have to take this system and try to make it as fair in its actuality. It's the system we have. We have to have a system of laws. We have to have a system of courts. And we all have been doing this for quite some time. And I'm happy to say we've seen a really good change in terms of people accepting and understanding that juvenile court is different and that kids are different. And I think the biggest thing is for those of us in the system, especially new attorneys coming to the system, when you want to come down to juvenile court and take appointments, that's great, but learn about our kids, learn about poverty, learn about disparate treatment, learn about how unjust the system has been, learn about the situation that these kids are in. So how can you do that? Well, number one, you can certainly look at the Administrative Office of the Court's websites. They have great CLEs. They're all online. It's wonderful. They did a whole section about bias. They did a whole section on the COVID-19 issues. It's really, really important to educate yourself. One of the other things that you can do is become a child welfare law specialist. I started off as a neglect dependency attorney, then I was general counsel for DCS, and then I became a prosecutor. And in a lot of ways, prosecutors used to be, I'm a prosecutor, I'm a career prosecutor, and now we understand juvenile prosecutors need that neglect dependency background, because the hard part is not whether this kid did it or not, it's how can we help this child and this youth then move beyond that. And that's where the rub is, that's where the difficult part is. And so it's really important for defense attorneys to know about participatory defense, mitigation strategies, mental health issues, all of the child welfare issues, the adverse childhood experiences, to educate themselves so that they can absolutely advocate for that youth. They also need to know about the community resources. A lot of prosecutors, it's basically guilty or not guilty. If they're guilty, there's a range of sentence. That's not what we do at juvenile court. It's what do we do next? And the CANS is a wonderful assessment. We need mental health assessments. We need to know what kind of intervention is going to help our youth move on. I think in order for us to be good stewards of this system is for all of us to recognize, including prosecutors, that a guilty plea that's not the end all and be all. That's really just the start of the treatment. And do we always need a guilty plea? One of the other things that we did when we amended the rules is we added in a judicial diversion. So remember, there's true diversion before pre-petition. That's great, keep the kid out of the system. But if the kid comes into the system, what can we do to make sure that that kid doesn't get stuck in our system? And a judicial diversion is a great option because it allows for dismissal and expungement. A pretrial diversion is an even better option. Looking at a youth and how their future will be. The other thing is allowing for expungements. We have many times amended and increased the ability to expunge because we all recognize this is a kid who made a mistake, and maybe it's a bad mistake and they need to have some treatment, but it doesn't need to create a problem for them for the rest of their lives. So a big part is to look at that helicopter view, whether you're the prosecutor, the lawyer, the defense attorney, the CASA worker, the child advocate, the social worker, look at that helicopter view. And if one part of the system is not doing what they need to do for that child or family, speak up. Just as Judge Stokes is saying, we all have to acknowledge this is not a fair system. This isn't the best legal system. This is a system that is inherently disparate. So how do we fix that? Well, by doing the best we can from the inside out and being aware of that, acknowledging that, and kind of atoning and taking that into account and seeing what can we do for this youth so that they can move beyond the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Again, just hearing more of that integration sort of discussion is very, very powerful. Dr. Williams, again, looking at the system in innovative ways to make improvements and do things a little bit differently. I know that you are using mediation in your courts. And so, when we hear the word mediation, we often think about divorce cases and contract disputes and things of that nature. Tell us how you and Shelby County Juvenile Court is using mediation to help reform our youth justice system.
Yeah, so Juvenile Court of Memphis and Shelby County is an Annie E. Casey Foundation site, JDAI site. And at JDAI, I know we have a lot of alphabet soup. It's Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative. And, when I went to Seattle, I did a presentation, and I also attended a lot of trainings. I heard a lot about restorative justice mediation. And to kind of give everybody an idea of what that is, it is a practice that resolves, but it also repairs conflict at the community level with the victim, which was a gap in the system. We often know that, Stacy, you being the AG, we know that oftentimes we talk about the kids, and even the kids' parents, but oftentimes there's a victim that needs, that is left unresolved oftentimes, and they need repair. You know, they've been vandalized, their car's been stolen. Oftentimes, you know, they want to know what's going on. Well, in restorative justice mediation, you have a third party mediator, not a juvenile court employee, but we partner with Nashville Conflict Resolution Center, and they are specialized. They created an office here in Memphis, and they have a person who would reach out to the victim, reach out to the defendant, and get them to the table together. Well, now it's a virtual table, but to be able to have a conversation. But not only have a conversation, they want to prevent it from happening again. And a lot of times, you know, domestic assault is one of our top charges here in Memphis. Well, guess what? They can go in and have a conversation between the parent and the child and come up with some solutions. But not only come up with those solutions, they could also come up with ways where the kid can give back to their community, and have some victim advocacy. And not only that, a lot of these kids are getting someone at the mediation table that has active listening and empathy. And not only that, it's just strategic problem solving. And it's a healthy way to teach kids like, hey, you actually hurt someone and this is what that person looks like. Now they can't get to work because you've messed up their car. And they're able to see a real life story in front of them, Craig. And I believe that is something that settles on the heart of a young person to say like, whoa, they're a parent too. They've got kids. I didn't realize that, you know, by me doing what I did, I caused someone to miss work and possibly even lose their job. So it creates a paradigm shift, I think, when you have a mediator that can bring the parties together, bring the community together, and create some sense of wholeness even for the victim.
And that is some incredible work going on that takes into account the whole issue, not just from one side. Thank you for sharing that with us. Judge Stokes, so we've talked about some systems improvements, and a lot of what's going on, at least that's presented in this panel, has been from larger urban areas. And so I want to talk to you or ask you a question. So we've been through so much this past year and this year, obstacles and opportunities, particularly with COVID-19. So I want to ask you, what are some ways that the more rural juvenile courts have had to make adjustments during this time of the pandemic?
You know, it has presented a lot of challenges. It's given us a lot of opportunities too. I think we are doing some healthier things. There's a lot of things that have gone on with just trying to using masks and doing so many things by Zoom and those type. But we've developed a lot of resources. Yesterday, I was in court from 9 till 6:30 with a lot of different hearings because we've had a little bit of a backlog and we're trying to get some of these taken care of. But I had witnesses testifying from Memphis, had some from the Youth Villages program, but we've had the opportunity to develop this communication, and that's something that for people that are serving in those type of programs, that's a great thing for them to be able to testify by Zoom. So these type of resources have been developed, and we can agree to have key witnesses like that testify from afar and get that done. So that's developed a lot of resources that we haven't had before. You know, you have challenges because when you're dealing with juvenile law or any kind of criminal law, I do a lot of adult criminal law and juvenile and all kinds of different things. But we want people to be able to confront witnesses, you know, to have, there's a good feel that you get from having witnesses there in the courtroom with you. And so you're trying to maximize that, particularly in more serious cases, try to look and see what you can do with that, taking away their ability to have a good and fair hearing. But I do think we've developed resources. A lot of things like this we'll continue to use. We've had an ability to have hearings from a detention center And we've pretty much had that part of it before. We've done a lot that way, but with the adult system, we've developed more resources for a court call and having those type of things available. So that's worked out really well. And those are resources that we'll always have now. And also would just like to say a couple of things about what my fellow panelists said. That's remarkable work, some tremendous things going on. Here in our smaller county, what we like to do is we have all of our people that are youth services officers, all people who are going to be service providers. They meet before we have a hearing date, and they meet and they come up with resources for each person that's going to be in court. And so when they come in, there is a plan. We don't take away any of their due process rights. If they're going to have a trial, that's not things I learn about, but they have it ready to go that they're talking about. We want to let people know, and this includes people from whatever background they have, whatever the people of color and so on. We want to know about them, know about how they're doing in school. So we have a school report each time. We want to know how they're doing in their neighborhood. We want to know how things are going, so that we have a total report. So when we come in, we can have a plan that's designed for them. A specific plan that's individualized. And I think that's an important thing. And I see that of what the fellow panelists have been talking about you're trying to develop that plan that's specific to that young person. And that takes an effort. It takes an effort on a team of people. And it's a whole lot more than the judge. In fact, much of it is done by people that are not judges. They're doing all the background and having that available for us without sacrificing any of their ability to have good due process. Also, as a judge, I have the opportunity to be a part of wanting the prosecutor to do their job and to understand everything we're doing, and for them to feel confident in me and that they can challenge me if they have an issue, or judge, I don't think you're seeing this, or and then defenders and public defenders that are there. We want them to be able to do their job and making sure they have the time to do that. So those are a few thoughts, and I'll let the other panel chime in.
So let me ask a question. I've been reading some of the comments in the chat. I don't know if you can see them as well. There was a question regarding, we're talking about helping youth once they're in the system. And one of the questions was, what are some things that we might be able to do, or some things we should be thinking about to help address the youth before they get into the system? The question was more an upstream approach. And so I'll just open that up to any of the panelists that want to chime in.
I think, number one, you're going to have partnerships in the community. And like I said, we have a staff member at various precincts. So, the school can call the precinct and speak directly to that counselor, and they can get a forewarning. A community member, a neighbor can pick up the phone and call, and they know where they are and where they're located at. So it gives them an opportunity to have a conversation at early stages. Hey, this kid is throwing rocks, hitting my home. And they can pick up the phone, and then they can start doing that. And not only that, but the patrol officers are in the community. They can pick up the phone and call the counselor and say, hey, I need you to contact this family and start working with them, see if you can get them some resources. So going back to that word that we even learned from on yesterday, that integration, I think we have to be present in the community. That is going to be very important, that we get behind our four walls, go out in the community and build those relationships with law enforcement and at the school level, so that we can get in contact with the heartbeat of the community.
Well said.
I totally agree with Dr. Williams. And I think one of the things that Judge Calloway did here in Davidson County when she first took the bench, she got very involved with the school system, because we know that one of the, we've heard forever the school to prison pipeline, and we know that it's true. So we need to keep our kids in school. We need to keep them engaged, and we need to not be a system, an education system and a court system that allows kids to be basically kicked out of school and put into a situation where they don't have anything else to do but burglarize motor vehicles. I mean, they've got nothing to do that day. And so she worked really hard with our court administrator, Kathy Sinback, to work with our schools and make sure that kids under the age of 12 are not arrested and brought to juvenile court. That's not going to happen. There needs to be, and there's restorative justice at school. There are more counselors at school. There's more interaction with the community, so school resources can address those issues, and the court is there for support. But we don't want those kids to be coming to our detention center. That's not really appropriate. And a lot of times it's behavior management, it's other issues. It might be mental health issues that are starting to come across. And so part of it is, as a community, we have to engage the right service provider and not have juvenile court be kind of the fallback system. The response should never be, let's just arrest him. That's just not a good response. For the violent offenses, yes. I mean, there's going to be an arrest, they'll go to detention. That's the right use of the resources. But the question was about how do we stop it in the beginning? And if we can stop that arrest, if we can get those services to the kid through restorative justice, we use NCRC as well for mediation. And I totally agree with what Dr. Williams said. We have a lot of the domestic assault, parents don't know what to do, and so they make a phone call to the police. When the police get called, because it's a domestic, they feel like they're supposed to arrest someone. So if we can get mediation in there and help families develop those resources, the skills to talk at the kitchen table, to talk through a situation and make the referrals for the community mental health services or medical services, or just simply resources through the Department of Children's Services, we have stopped that kid from coming into the system. So I agree completely. Ideally, we want to keep seeing our numbers go down. We don't want to keep feeding our system. And those kids that end up in our system, as Judge Stokes says, we've got to treat them fairly. We cannot treat any kid different than any other kid. We've got to make sure that all the resources are available to every family so they don't remain in our system, and mostly so they don't end up being graduates of our system and going to the adult system. We don't want that to happen. Our office does not see a transfer from a juvenile to adult system as a success. That honestly is a failure on everybody's part. Sometimes it's necessary because of the level of violence, but it's not something that should be celebrated. It's something we need to look at. We need to dissect and figure out, where did the system miss? What part did we miss in order to stop that? Thank you.
Those are all excellent. I've always thought of the way that the school system works with the court system. Many times it's like a double jeopardy, where you're having a punishment in the school system that is very adequate to address the situation. And we always want to discourage, lunchroom pushing and shoving ended up in the court system, and making sure they handle it there. One of the in the North Carolina task force, they were suggesting having somebody that was in the system that would screen all cases that were going to go from the school system to the court system, so that you'd make sure that it's really appropriate according to principles. There's according to the principles of law and the principles of juvenile law, that you're trying to be benevolent, you're trying to be not bring everybody in and make them feel like a criminal. So don't bring them in unless it was going to serve a purpose that is necessary, while still supporting the teachers, that if there's a serious assault upon them or on others, then that would be appropriate to come in to protect, to be protected, but not just for simple things that they could keep within the school system. And never suspend them. Don't suspend them except in very serious matters where they're taken out of school. But those are excellent thoughts by the panelists.
And Judge Stokes, we, in Davidson County, we instituted what's called a staffing committee. And so our staffing committee actually reviews all citations, all arrests, all of the cases, and as many diversions as we can do, we will go ahead and divert, but we will look at those every single case, and we do that once a week. And it's myself, the public defender. We have a victim services coordinator. She's wonderful. And our director of intake, we also have a mediation person available. And we go ahead and go through those cases. And so that the ones that go to a docket are the ones that, as a team and as a prosecutor, I feel like for community safety purposes, we have to go forward with.
That's fantastic. Judge Calloway's a good friend. She's all kinds of energy and desire to really serve children and do what's best for them. So that's excellent.
So we have about 5 minutes, and with that last 5 minutes, I'd like to hear from each of you, so about 1 minute and 30, 40 seconds or so. And so we've been talking about integration and getting out in the community and forming these community partnerships. Just quickly, what have been some barriers regarding forming? It's easy to say form partnerships, but sometimes we run into barriers. What are some barriers and some quick resolutions that you may have?
Well, I'll say this: there's a saying in scripture that says the blind can't lead the blind unless they both fall into a ditch. And then you'll see this word comes next right here. It says the disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be his master. So I would say training. You've got to have people. You have a lot of people who would like to work with our kids, but you know, the complexity, the adverse childhood experiences from the children are so it's so entangled. And so I saw someone even say poverty, the parents being victim. You know, sometimes it's a generational impact that you can't even work with the child without working with the parent. So sometimes I would say for us, people need to be thoroughly trained in adverse childhood experiences and have that integrated in their policies and procedures. So sometimes if I could point one thing, that community agencies that want to work with the juvenile court system need to thoroughly understand adverse childhood experiences and thoroughly understand that everyone needs to be trained and have policies to represent that.
I'll go next so we can have Judge Stokes, who is, I believe, the wisest of us all, finish up because he's just amazing. I could hear him talk all day. I think the first things that we did when Judge Calloway took the bench is we kind of all had a meeting to see, are we all on the same page? Myself, the DCS person, the defense attorneys, the court administrator, and kind of as a miracle, we all were. We all had the same vision. Then the next goal, I think, is to, when you hit barriers, when you are communicating as a court and a community a consistent message, it's kind of like a brick wall. People can't break through it. So when we had police officers who were saying things like, how long can we lock this kid up for, and that type of thing, we just kept all saying the same thing. It's about rehabilitation and treatment. We will provide community resources. This is what we can offer. And having a consistent message communicated by all the parties, basically, like I said, we created this brick wall of, we are about rehabilitation and treatment. We are about working with the kids and families. We are about treating everyone fairly. And that's just how it is. And you can get mad at me at the courthouse, but my answer is going to be the same. We're going to look at rehabilitation and treatment. And that's all of the answers of all the people who work here. And that's really worked for us. Thank you.
I'm going to go back with my last few thoughts to what you both were talking about earlier. And that's the use of diversion and deferral. And I just think it's such a big deal to use informal adjustment, to use the deferrals, the diversions to keep people from having a criminal record. Our default position is going to be to give an opportunity for a diversion in each case unless there's a reason not to or that they do not qualify. And we hadn't talked very much about transfers, but at each stage we do have disparate treatment that's given for people of color. And so it's very important to look at each stage that we have. I very, very, very rarely have a transfer because the default position is going to be to keep somebody in juvenile court unless there's an absolute reason to go. And that can be for the very nature of the crime, the fact that they've been a repeat offender and they're 17 years old and there's not much else to do. But just to realize that doing the humane thing, doing the loving thing, doing the providing services to the family, trying to do everything we can to keep the family intact, keep them together, to train them, to work with them, and to help them realize what an important part of the whole process they are, that we're going to try to do what's best for them and work with them in any way. And I think y'all have really summarized that in what you've said. And I really appreciate both of you and what you're doing. And Craig, thank you very much. Appreciate you, buddy.
I just want to thank our panelists. Y'all have just been awesome and shared some very vital information. And thank you so much for taking time out to share this with Tennessee and other folks throughout the nation. I'll turn it over to Richard Kennedy, our Executive Director.
Mercy. Thank you, Craig, so much. Stacy, Judge Stokes, Dr. Williams, how do I even begin to thank you guys? You are three of my favorite people in the world and three of my personal heroes. So thank you for being with us this morning, sharing your wisdom and all that you do every single day. You each offered unique insight into the youth justice world that I certainly appreciated, and I'm sure all of our participants did as well. So thank you guys very, very much. We appreciate you. Up next, I am really excited to present a brand new Children's Advocacy Day Award. At TCCY, we very much believe that we should reward and highlight what we want to see more of in the world. Most days and weeks, we learn of an individual or hear of an organization who's working diligently, collaboratively, and creatively to make their community stronger. At their meeting in February 2021, the members of the commission voted to create a Friend of Children Award to be presented at Children's Advocacy Days. This award is designed and intended to recognize an individual or organization who goes above and beyond to improve outcomes for children, youth, and families in their communities. It's my pleasure to present the first TCCY Friend of Children Award to Mr. Matthew Marshall. Increasingly, Matthew Marshall is a critical partner with TCCY's work in West Tennessee. He serves as the president and CEO of United Way of West Tennessee. He was formerly the executive director and head of school at Hands Up Preschool, a nonprofit early childhood education program in Jackson, Tennessee. Before that, he spent 8 years in higher education at his alma mater, Union University, where he did undergraduate work in Christian ethics and then earned a master's in education. During his time at Union, Matt served as the director of the Center for Racial Reconciliation and the director of Service and Diversity Initiatives. He also held the position of director of student success after getting his start in admissions. He's passionate about the West Tennessee area and says he longs to see the day where every West Tennessean has access to an equitable and healthy life, a quality education, and a financially stable home. He's been involved with the Anti-Poverty Task Force for the City of Jackson, with the Jackson-Madison County Equity Project, with the United Ways of Tennessee State Association, as well as a team member of the City of Jackson Recovery Court and the Jackson-Madison County School System Parent Council. He also serves as the young adult pastor at the historic First Baptist Church in Jackson. We are so thankful for Matt Marshall and all that he contributes to the community, and we're pleased to present the very first Friend of Children Award to Mr. Matthew Marshall.
Well, it's certainly my honor to be recognized with the Friends of Children Award from the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. I am so incredibly grateful, and I want to thank the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, as well as thanking my wife Rachel and my family, as well as all of my staff members here at United Way of West Tennessee. You know, we work hard every single day to make sure that every single person has access to equitable, healthy, and educated, and a financially stable life. And that, while there are challenges for sure in our communities, we live in one of the best communities in the world. And so it is my honor to advocate for everyone in our community, but primarily those of us who are most vulnerable, namely the children in our communities. And so we continue to fight and work hard every single day alongside the Tennessee Commission and so many others to make sure that our children have a future that they can dream of incredible things. And so it starts right now. We don't just look to the future as some distant thing out there, but rather we start imagining and dreaming right here, right now. So again, I just want to thank the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, thank all the wonderful folks who I get to work with every day, and we just look forward to doing even more incredible things. Thank you.
No one wants to feel out of control, especially when they're behind the wheel. But that's exactly what happens when you're caught in a collision. It's a risk that's taken every time someone presses the gas because there are too many drivers who think the world will adjust to their speed if they can go fast enough, that they can outmaneuver any consequences with enough horsepower, enough money, Enough bullets, as if it weren't already bad enough without our officers abusing their power, their speed, spending our nation's cash on new toys from the military. It doesn't matter if you're driving safely or if you have your hands up when a cop has a right to reckless driving holster next to their handcuffs. Police officers, billionaires, politicians, these people in positions of power forget that everyone else is at risk when they want to cruise above the law. And for some reason we let them, because we live in a world where you can trade accountability for cash, where our courts are fluent in the language of change, but not the kind that improves society. When did justice become so expensive? When did wealth become synonymous with innocence, as if having money makes you an angel no matter how terrible your actions are? No one wants to feel out of control. But when the elites go on a joyride, control is exactly what they steal from others. When it's like you have no control over your own safety, when they can drive so carelessly, exploit whoever they want, abuse whoever they want, crash into whoever they want. I wish I could say this was just a metaphor, but these crashes literally happen. And no matter how bad the accident was, how badly others get hurt, the car is always gone in a matter of days. Silently taken care of by attorneys, with underhanded exchanges and secret conversations. Suddenly it's like the crash never happened in the first place. The thing about a car crash, though, is if you look close enough, there are always shards left in the grass. The pieces of glass and metal scattered across the road, left behind like a shameful memory, like the people left behind after the scandal or the controversy, the people who remember and refuse to let everyone else forget. The people who won't hide all their scratches and scrapes because once others can see how their dents glimmer in the sunlight, maybe they'll start to pay attention. The people who know you only lose control once you give up and accept these unfair exceptions. And once we can acknowledge how screwed up our justice system is and wipe off our windshields to see what's really going on, one day our roads, our world can be safe. These crashes won't have to happen in the first place.
We can calculate the circumference of the whole Earth to be 24,901 miles. IBM can build a supercomputer capable of holding 12,000 gigabytes of information. We spend $100 billion on the International Space Station. And by 2020, we're introducing 5G broadband to the entire world. But we still can't find another innocent missing Black girl. Human capability sustained by warped logic. They ration our lives like they rationalize any new scientific inquiry. But with Toy and Salah or Tawny Reed, it's some unexplainable Area 51 that just stays in the X-file. Because Black girls' disappearances are treated like magic tricks, like rabbits grabbed by their ears and forced into black market hats, like handkerchiefs put out of pockets again and again and again, because the list of us just never ends. 64,000 Black girls have now vanished. And the crowd goes numb, silent. They'd rather make algorithms for their fantasy football games or predict the location of subatomic particles in space, but still can't postulate why our predicaments should take precedence despite the preponderance of evidence that suggests that missing girls are not just runaways, that hangings are not just suicide cases, and that Black girls' deaths are worth enough to investigate. See, our deaths aren't magic because we know how it works. It's not some unsolvable trick. So if society is so advanced, put an end to human traffic.
And so we're so thankful for the presentations by our youth. They're always so powerful and poignant. At this time, I am honored and excited to welcome the insightful, the fearless, the oftentimes unfiltered Chief Judge Teske. He'll be speaking to us about the youth justice system through a social lens and provide examples of what that may look like in action. Judge Stephen Teske is the Chief Judge of the Juvenile Court for Clayton County, Georgia. Judge Teske testified before Congress on 4 occasions in several state legislatures on detention reform, zero tolerance policies in schools, juvenile justice reform, youth justice grant accountability, the Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Act and the reauthorization of that act. Judge Teske has served as a litigative expert for the U.S. Department of Justice in the school to prison pipeline case, the United States of America versus Meridian. And that case resulted in a landmark consent decree mandating sweeping reforms of school disciplinary practices that were harmful to children and youth of color. I know Judge Teske through his leadership as the former national chair of the Coalition for Juvenile Justice. Without further ado, I give to you one of 2 men on the face of the earth that I know that can wear a bow tie as well, if not better than me, the Honorable Judge Stephen Teske.
Well, thank you, Craig. It's truly an honor to be here with everyone. I'm looking down, I see we have approximately 700 participants. And if we can go ahead and, am I supposed to share my screen and do the PowerPoint from my end, or somebody else bringing it up?
You're welcome.
If you can share it, that would be good.
Okay, yeah, let me go ahead and bring that up real quick. Let's see. Should only take a moment. You know, after doing Zoom for a year now with virtual court, I've gotten pretty good at this stuff. All right, go to my presentation folder. So while I'm bringing this up, let me just tell you what the thesis of this next hour, or close to an hour, is going to be about. And Craig mentioned about the social justice lens. And the thesis is this, you know, I'm a big believer in evidence-based programs and practices. However, they have their limitations. And I think that many jurisdictions across the country are failing, okay, to recognize the social structural conditions of their own systems that are impeding these evidence-based practices and programs to be the most valuable to their youth. And that's what I want to talk about. In what way is that happening, and how do you repair that using a structural condition theory combined with the social justice theory. Okay, let me bring this up. All right, it's opening. All right. Now let me get back to my Zoom. Let me share screen. Okay, can y'all see that?
We can.
Okay, good. Okay, so titled "The Future of Juvenile Justice is Evidence-Based Systems Enough to Prevent Delinquency." Okay, let me skip through this. There's a lot to cover here. I don't need to go through that. I just want to start off, and let's talk about facts, okay? I think we all know that the juvenile crime rate has been decreasing significantly since the mid-1990s, okay? You see here from 1982 to 2018, it's just dropping significantly. Yet we still have so many people out there, particularly politicians, who use this political rhetoric that I call the politics of fear in order to get reelected or to get elected, trying to make it look like our kids out there are the worst in the world, okay? And that's bull crap, okay? You know, I challenge anyone to go back and look at the West Side Story. Remember the Broadway? It was like 1954 when it came out on Broadway. Later captured in film. And you had the Jets and the Sharks, the two gangs in New York, right? And there's this one scenario where the kids are out there on the street hanging out. And Officer Krupke comes up and he harasses them, gives them a hard time. All right, well, he gets a call, he takes off, and then they go into this little spiel, this little musical where they pretend, you know, because they're called delinquents, how they pick this one kid and they take him through the system. They take him to the judge, they take him to the social worker, they take him to the psychologist, you know, and then he ends up in jail. But the point is, and all that, if you go back and listen to it and hear what those kids say that they are enduring in their homes, it's no different than what they're enduring today. Nothing's changed, okay? But we want to make out our kids to be monsters, all right? When stuff like this you see right here says otherwise. So all of y'all will have access to this. I'm not going to go through, I don't have time, but I want to make sure you have all the data here, you know, murder, rape, violent crime, so forth, okay? But here's what I want to get to. The racial disparities, though, notwithstanding the dramatic decrease in juvenile arrests. Look at this. The population in this country, all right, 60% white, 13.4, you know, African American, but arrests by race. Not much disparity there when it comes to white folks, all right? But look at that. It's about triple, okay, for our youth of color in this country. Why? Why is that? Okay? And again, I'm telling you, there's a number of factors at play here, from you know, personalities making it through psychological evaluations in law enforcement where they're either racist. We all have implicit bias, okay? But I think also most importantly is the structural conditions, whether it's a law enforcement agency, whether it's a juvenile court, whether it's a probation department, I don't care. That we have to take a look systemically, okay, at our respective systems and ask ourselves the question at every detention decision point, okay, what can we do to avoid the operation of implicit bias? And where in our system, okay, does it not allow us, okay, to do that? But in fact, okay, it may unwittingly, unknowingly to us, promote it. I've said before many times in my presentations, I don't care how good you are. I don't care how well your heart and your head is wrapped around social justice and equity, okay? If you work in a broken system, you're still going to make broken decisions. That's a fact. That's a fact, okay? And so no matter how much we bring in evidence-based practices and programs, particularly programs, they're not going to be as good as the system itself that supports those, okay? And we have to also look at the global picture. It's not just about our own system, but it's about our economy. It's about how we treat people of color, okay? You know, listen to these youth, what they're talking about, these two. That was powerful, okay? You know, until we start taking a serious look at poverty in this country, in which unfortunately there are still too many people of color, whether you're brown, you're black, okay, or even red if you're on an Indian reservation, okay, are trapped in this invisible prison of poverty, okay? And why? Because of the generational trauma that we white people, okay, have imposed upon them, all right? I mean, you know, I encounter so many of my friends of my complexion who complain to me. Well, I don't understand what their problem is. I mean, you know, they got rid of separate but equal facilities. They got the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, as if getting those laws are going to ensure economic mobility overnight. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. Okay? That's absolutely illogical. But you know why people don't want to acknowledge it? Because they don't have a heart and head around understanding equity. Because they don't even want to hear it. Because they have blinders on. Now, I'm going to stop preaching right there. So now you know where I am, okay? All right? Now you know what my thoughts are. So let's move forward and get real practical about this, okay? All right? I'm not going to go into all this, but I leave you with data so you can look at it later. What are the most common sanctions, okay, among juvenile probation, which tends to be, what is the most common sanction, which is probation. And I really like what Judge Stokes said when I came in at the end and he was doing his closing. And he is a judge to my own heart, okay, when he says he endeavors to avoid transferring kids to adult court. Good for you, Judge Stokes, okay? We need to keep as many kids in the juvenile justice system because they're juveniles, all right? What an oxymoron to treat a juvenile as an adult. Okay, so let's talk about racial disparities and dispositions of youth. Look at this. Again, there's your population, 13.4% African-American, 60% white, okay? But probation, why is it? We have fewer white kids. And you know, if there's a disproportionate number here, it's not only African-Americans in terms of the fact that we're tripling the sanctioning of them, okay? But there's a lot fewer whites. There's a disproportionate going the reverse direction for white kids. We treat white kids better than we do black kids on the same offenses, okay? All right? And again, we need to figure out in our system, why are we doing this, okay? And I'm gonna tell you part of the problem is this. We don't do a good job with our needs. For those jurisdictions out there that do risk and needs assessment, here's another point. It is an evidence-based practice, right? I mean, targeting high-risk youth, to do that, you need to know the risk level of the youth, but then you do a needs basis, right? A needs assessment. You know what happens? Of course, kids of color, of which there are many in our who come in contact with the juvenile court, live at or below the poverty level. Obviously, there's going to be higher needs there. But why are we still putting them on probation to meet those needs? We're just making them worse. We're hurting them. We're harming them. So I'm telling you right now, folks, for those of you who do needs assessments, you better put into place another set of lens that says, that's asking you, you're asking yourself, am I really putting this kid on probation because he's a serious enough risk that he needs the supervision? Or am I doing it because out of my heart, I want to help him because he's high needs? When in fact, I don't care how good your heart is, you're letting the system harm the kid worse. You're going to make that kid into a criminal. You are creating that pipeline, using that needs assessment into the prison system, all right? Okay, that's another social structural condition we have to look at here. All right, just because it's an evidence, because it has the words evidence-based in front of it, Peter, be careful, because if you're applying it the wrong way, you're harming kids. So, how do we do this? Well, we just have to reduce youth involvement. That's the first thing. I don't care how much you want to get help with this kid, get help another way, not in a delinquency system. So, why is this important? First of all, most kids age out of their delinquent behaviors, okay? Most of them do. And because most of them do, we don't need to be thinking about sanctioning them. That shouldn't be our first thought. It should be diverting them away from the juvenile justice system. The more kids you can divert, just like Judge Stokes said, at the deep end level, you know, even though this kid committed a serious offense and maybe under law is eligible to be transferred over to adult court, doesn't mean you have to do it, okay? Doesn't mean you have to do it. So I'm going to be talking to you later. I'm going to show you what is called a recidivist reduction algorithm, okay? Where it takes you through the various detention decision points of a juvenile court, and I use my court, okay, where I've created these opportunities to move kids out of the system. How many systems really think hard about, okay, I'm going to change my system, and I'm going to see how many places I can set up in my system that I can reevaluate all these kids and push them out of the system instead of keeping them in the system, all right? Okay, so systems need to be designed to avoid hyper-recidivism. Okay, this is a term I coined in 2013 in one of my publications, okay? It is a phenomena that occurs when adults respond to disruptive or minor delinquent behaviors using harsh punishers, you know, the ones that are usually reserved for your more serious or harmful conduct. And as a result, it overstimulates the senses and exacerbates the use behaviors. It's pretty much like the labeling theory, okay? In fact, in support of that, and as I wrote in my paper, okay, the labeling theory, it emphasizes the stigma and negative consequences. And so when we do that to a kid, you know, when most kids are going to age out of delinquency, but then we treat them as if they're delinquent, then they begin to act like they're delinquent, okay? There's also, and I'm not going to go into it now, but the differential association theory also suggests the same thing. And so what diversion does is it attempts to minimize the effects of labeling associated with offending and limit the opportunities that youth have to associate with antisocial peers by reducing their contact and exposure to the juvenile justice system, okay? Now, I'm just gonna leave with this. I don't have time to talk about it, but you're gonna get access to this PowerPoint. So there you go. There's research there. Everything I talk about is supported in research. All right. I'm going to talk in a little bit more specifically about another tool. Many of you out there are already familiar with me in terms of my school justice partnership model, which is the first of its kind in the nation, created in 2003 to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. It's now been replicated in multiple jurisdictions in 41 states. In fact, it has been studied by 3 researchers, in fact, right there from Tennessee at Vanderbilt University, Mark Lipsey, okay, who placed in their book, James Howe, Mark Lipsey, and John Wilson, right here, okay. The virtual background doesn't really help, but it's titled A Handbook for Evidence-Based Juvenile Justice Systems, and right there, starting on page 47, it talks about the school justice partnership as an evidence-based system to successfully reduce school arrests, school suspensions, and expulsions that ultimately will lead to an increase in graduation rates. And guess what, folks? When you increase graduation rates, you're going to have fewer kids committing crimes. I mean, go figure that, right? I mean, you know, first of all, who'd ever think keeping kids in school would increase graduation rates? Oh, I know that's a hard thing. That took a long time to figure out. But how is it that for so many years, educators couldn't figure that out? Okay. You know, and that's why we need to work collaborative systems. That's why we need to marry the education system and the juvenile justice system. They need to be talking on a regular basis and learning from each other, okay, what the studies show, like hyper-recidivism. Hey, teachers, counselors, school superintendents, you know, the more kids we arrest, we push them out of school. That's going to reduce your graduation rates and it's going to increase the crime rates. We're turning them into criminals. Hello? No, is everyone here? Okay. And I don't need to go through this. Kids process things differently. You know, the frontal lobe, all that, it's not developed till age 25. That's part of the brain that translates emotion into logic. Okay, I mean, go figure. And now we have landmark Supreme Court decisions that use basically solely this research, okay, to number one, say, we cannot execute kids. All right, that's wrong. All right, their brain is not fully developed. And the other thing is that to get rid of putting them in prison for life without parole, okay? I mean, how many of you, okay, want the rest of your life defined by something you did when you were 14 years old? That's basically what the Supreme Court is saying, okay? Now, I want to talk to you about this real quick. My approach through this whole you know, reform that I started as a judge way back in 2003 has 2 components. Not only does it have its social structural condition theory framework or lens, looking at every detention decision point that led to the development that I'm going to show you in a moment of the recidivist reduction algorithm. But there's another approach, and it's a public health approach. And this was something taught to me by my father, okay, who retired from CDC, and he was involved in infectious diseases and immunization, okay. And in fact, he was the one that was that helped lead the mid-1970s swine flu vaccination. But I want you to look at this epidemiology model. It provides, for studying diseases, okay? It provides a basis for developing surveillance measures and prevention procedures for groups. And look at this, an at-risk population. So what I call our vulnerable children who are at risk of committing delinquent acts and serious ones. And to identify the causation and then the strategies that impact both groups and populations. This allows for individual treatments to be effective. What I had to do, and I realized a long time ago the help of my father, because my father in a conversation when he was asking me one of those after cookout things in his backyard, and we're sitting down with a bourbon, having a conversation, and he says, hey son, what's going on these days? And this was in 2002, and I was telling him my frustration on the data and the racial disparities, and that I'm trying to work on getting it done and try to eradicate this stuff in my own system. And he finally, when I got done, he said, son, are you done? I said, yeah. He said, he took his finger and he said, the problem with you folks in criminal justice? He said, you treat the symptom instead of the cause. These kids, their behaviors, it's a symptom. But what do? You focus on punishing the symptom. I mean, how many doctors are going to keep their medical license if that's all they do is treat the symptom instead of trying to identify what's causing the symptom? All right? But this is not the magical thing that he taught me. I'm going to tell you what was magical. It's this. He said, son, there are two basic epidemiological facts that we live by in epidemiology. One, diseases don't occur by chance, and they're not distributed at random, which means they can be studied, right? Okay. But the same is true with disruptive behaviors and delinquent behaviors. They're not diseases, but they behave like diseases. Delinquent behaviors do not occur by chance, folks. They're not distributed at random. They can be studied. And the problem with many of our systems is we spend too much time focusing on what the kid did as opposed to why the kid did it. All right? And again, this goes back to the whole social justice theory and the whole social structural condition, okay, that keeps us from looking at the causes. All right? And one of those things happens to be that lower level of Maslow's hierarchy, those basic needs that we're not helping these families and the kids deal with. Look, I have a kid named Will Lewis. All right. He was on probation. He was in my second chance program, high risk intensive probation, intensive mostly on treatment and surveillance as well. These are the kids that were supposed to go to a youth prison for 5 years. And I created this program as part of that algorithm, this is the deep end program. These are kids that I believe we could still keep in the community, okay, and keep the community safe if we did it all right. And part of the problem was helping them meet their basic needs. Because here's what Will said. Will would go on, by the way, graduate high school, get his bachelor's degree in aviation science. And this last year, he got his master's degree in information technology, specializing in cybersecurity, and he now works for a cybersecurity firm. And I take him with me around the country to speak to judges and other juvenile justice practitioners. And this one time we were in San Diego, the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges, talking to a room full of judges, okay? And this is what he told them. His job was to teach them how to listen to kids like him who are high risk. And he told them this. He said, you know what? You can put me through all your evidence-based programs all you want, and I'll go through all your evidence-based programs. But I joined a gang as a result of meeting up with one of my elementary school friends, and after getting evicted like every other month, and I was the youngest of 8 kids, and we were poor, it felt good to put $400 cash in my mom's hands every month. It made me feel like a man and that I was helping my family. And you know what else? I was helping myself because I didn't have to worry about moving every other month. I hope y'all are listening to what I'm saying, okay? Because we have to do more than evidence-based programming. We have to figure out in our system, how do we help people navigate this poverty? How do we help them take some of the stress off? Because you know what? How are they going to abide by what they learn in evidence-based programming when they're struggling every day of their life just to survive, for God's sakes? You want to know why we have trouble? Despite all of our DMC work, we still can't get there to eliminate DMC. It's because of this issue. It's because of this issue. It's not, we can do everything we can to have the most perfect, equitable system. But as long as we're not helping these families at the basic level, they're still going to commit crimes just to survive. We need to face that fact, and we have to do more. Okay. What time is it? All right. Here's the other thing, folks, what I learned from my father. When children are hurting, their behavior becomes their language. You hear what I'm saying? We need to start learning their language, and it doesn't always come out of their mouth. It's their behavior, because they're hurting, they're angry, how they're having to live. They may not be able to translate in their head, but it still hurts. And by adolescence, it's coming out in their behavior. I'll give you an example. Jane, true story. It's an anecdote, but it is an anecdote that supports the evidence, okay? She's 15 years, I'm gonna go quick about this. 15 years old. She's at school. All of a sudden, she starts throwing chairs at the teacher after the teacher admonished her because she shouted out something at a fellow student, a young man sitting next to her, and threatening to kill her. Well, the SRO gets called and runs in there and grabs her before she throws the next chair. She struggles with the SRO, the school resource officer. He has no choice but to restrain her. Now, this was after we started the school justice partnership. In the old days, she would have just simply been marched out to a patrol car, taken down to juvenile court intake, likely detained because it's aggravated assault, okay, which is a designated felony in Georgia, for which at the time you could serve up to 5 years in prison, all right? But no, not anymore. Why? Epidemiology model, okay? We ask why first. All SROs have to find out why, ask why, and then make a decision whether or not this kid needs to come down to juvenile court intake. So he takes her into his office and starts asking her questions. Here's the bottom line, all right? I don't have time to take you through how he did it, but it turns out that that young man sitting next to her leaned over to her and said, hey, you know, told her what he wanted to do to her sexually. That's when she yelled at him. But here's the rest of the story. It turns out that she's being raped every week by her mother's live-in boyfriend. Oh, and she told her mom. Mom didn't believe her. Are you making the connection now? Boy leans over. This is what I want to do to you sexually. Well, this is what's happening to her every week, and she feels like all the adults, and then the teacher yells at her. And it's not the teacher's fault. The teacher did exactly what any teacher would do, okay? So don't get me wrong there. But caused her to snap. She had a meltdown. The rest of the story is that Willie, the boyfriend, I ended up issuing the warrant for Willie's arrest when CID came to me with the application for the warrant. He's now serving 25 years in prison. But my point is this, ladies and gentlemen, there are folks out there that want us to have a hard system. We need to treat these kids hard, okay? But we don't realize that if we don't stop and listen to their language, in other words, why did you behave this way? Maybe we just might get the rest of the story so that Jane doesn't have to be re-victimized, put in the detention center, who's being raped every week. No one believes her. Instead, she was put in protective custody. You want to know who's tougher on crime? It's my system that looks softer. The one that didn't lock her up. The one that took a little bit more time, the one that was more inconvenient on us, who, by the way, we're getting paid to be inconvenienced, to slow things down. to add a pause button to our system. Why? Instead of rushing kids through stuff. All right. What strategies approach? Let me wind this down, okay? And tools that are critical to reduce system involvement. Okay, this is what you really want. Okay, first of all, number one, punishers alone will increase recidivism. All right. So let's not focus on punishment. I don't know what happened here, but we need to utilize risk instruments to measure which kids scare us and those that just make us mad. The ones that make us mad, which are the vast majority of them, should never go through your front door. That's why I created the School Justice Partnership. Those kids are never arrested or complaints filed on. Instead, they're referred to a program. There's nothing juvenile court related, all right, with those kids. We know that if we treat low-risk kids in an intensive way, we make them worse. Okay, we need to save our intensive treatment to the higher risk youth, which are fewer of them, by the way. Look, when I became judge, the average caseload size was about 125 to 140. Okay, today it's only literally, it's not even an average. Okay, the most we have on any caseload is 25, and those are the high risk kids. Look, let me share something. I do not, by policy, I do not allow misdemeanors into the courtrooms. That's right. We do not let the prosecutors have the misdemeanor cases. That may shock a lot of y'all. Okay, those kids are diverted. All right, most of them we never see again. I'll show you that in just a moment. But the only time we get a misdemeanor, if it happens to be associated with a felony in the same transaction, that would be it. Okay, all right. I don't need to define diversion there, why it's a best practice. I think we've already talked about that. The diversion decision points. Many people miss the community. Anything that we can give our police and our schools in terms of any programming out there where they can divert, okay, without having to file a juvenile complaint, that's what we need to be doing to our systems, like the old station house adjustments. And you know what, juvenile courts, you need to, or probation departments, it behoove you if you extend your cells. Okay, so if you do diversion, extend your diversion to the police. Don't make them file a complaint just to divert a kid. Think outside the box. No, think outside the, as my wife says, think outside the room the box is in. Okay, all right. Now, here's your algorithm. I have it circled in red here. Now what you see, oops. Okay, so what you see here, okay, is your school justice partnership, and also what we have given to our police officers out on the streets, okay? And notice this is before anything filed with the court. Nothing's filed with the court. Instead, they refer to my restorative justice division. I have a restorative justice division, 9 full-time employees. They handle all these referrals, not complaints, not juvenile complaints. We're not creating records on these kids, okay? They handle all these referrals from the police in the school and on the streets without filing a juvenile court complaint, where we get them into restorative practices and other types of programs. All right? Okay. Now, then along the way, okay, we have those kids who commit more serious offenses like felonies, okay? And we still have, we have our juvenile detention alternative initiative, okay? Detention assessments, you know, I mean, in 2002, which was the baseline year, our average daily detention population, the 60-bed facility, was 62. There were some days there was over 100. However, today the average, well, before the pandemic, the average daily detention population was less than 15. Okay, all right. Today it's under 3. Because I've pretty much kind of thrown the detention assessment instrument out. We still use it just to keep up with data, but I issued a separate order allowing only violent offenders into the detention center. And we're not really having any problems, okay, with them on our alternatives to detention. And so we see this red circle up here. This is another way that we divert them. The moment it does come into the court, down here we have what's called the FAST panel, finding alternatives for safety and treatment. They meet every, we have two things. We have what's called, well, it's the FAST panel, that's for detention, okay, kids who are detained. We have a multidisciplinary group that looks at them, but then we also have the Quad CST, which is the Clayton County Collaborative Child Study Team. They meet often every week. Sometimes they go out to the schools if it's a school-related matter, okay? These are youth that are referred either by intake, by probation, by the court, where we think maybe the delinquency system is not the place for them. Maybe it needs to be in mental health or somewhere else, okay? And so this multidisciplinary team of experts meet on this child and family, interview them, talk to them, do assessments, and come up with a recommendation to the court. It's a way of what we call transition the kid out of the delinquency system into another system that's better fitted for this child and this family. Then we have down here what is our Deep In program, which is another release valve. You know, what I mentioned earlier, like Will Lewis, who went through that program and today he has his master's degree. And not only that, but these have all changed right here. They're much higher. But as a result of this was done, a few years back, and this was part of a presentation to the National Academies of Science and Health and Math and all that in Washington, D.C. But our probation is down 83%. Our detention admissions down 60, it's now 70-some%. Our length of stay is down, actually it's now down about 60-some%. Average daily population is down 80%. School arrests are down actually 95%. Our annual cost savings are $4 million as a result of this, okay? Now, as a result of the Second Chance program, where kids who we would commit to DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice, that upon their release within 3 years, 65% reoffend, usually on a more serious offense. Through the Second Chance program, these kids that would have gone and used to go to DJJ and get committed, okay, we only have about a 17% recidivist rate, okay? As a result of that, the total cost savings is between $25.5 to $38.7 million to the state, which is why the state gives me GPS monitors for no charge and all that, because I'm saving them millions of dollars, all right? Okay, all right, so we talked a little bit about school and police diversion and how important that is. I'm not going to go through that. I think I've already talked enough. The rest of this kind of goes through the specifics, and I don't have time to go in much detail, but you're going to get the PowerPoint. You'll have access to it. But essentially, what it is it's a partnership. It uses what's called a focus act decision tree to identify what delinquent offenses don't need to be referred from the school to the court. It replaces the arrest using a graduated response program. It's guided by a role conflict avoidance model, and it uses a positive student engagement model for policing, okay? And I have a toolkit if anyone's interested. Y'all can get my email from somebody there, okay? And I can send it to you. I've had some jurisdictions use my tool. In fact, my toolkit in North Carolina has been included into their practice guide. North Carolina, by law, adopted my school justice partnership. It is now state law, okay? And so they have a practice guide, and part of my toolkit is in their practice guide. And actually, you can Google the practice guide for North Carolina, and it's a very good practice guide. They did a great job. Okay, so you can see where school arrests went up. You know, we put SROs in. It wasn't the SRO's fault. It was our fault. We didn't train them correctly, you know, in adolescent development and things of that nature. And so they did what police officers are trained to do. They arrested based upon probable cause, including disorderly conduct, you know, things that I did as a kid, okay? And if you want to know more about the School Justice Partnership, I recently did a TED Talk. You can find it. It's titled, "When Did Making Adults Mad Become a Crime?" okay? And it's a TEDx. And so you can look it up. I guess just look up Teske and then when did making adults mad become a crime, TEDx, and you'll find it, okay? So let's see, where am I here? Now, here's what's important. We're talking about the social lens, okay? The first thing we need to do to help our kids of color is stop mistreating them. I've already mentioned that, okay? By finding what we can do in our system that doesn't allow them in our front door. Just let them live their life, okay? All right? You know, and if we're gonna help them, just do a little bit of help, all right? Not anything that's gonna put them into the system. But look here, look at what's happened, okay? Look at this dramatic increase. This is how many kids of color were arrested on school campus, okay? And since we introduced the School Justice Partnership, look what it did. Look what it did, okay? There's a spike here. And let me tell you what the interesting spike is. Folks have asked me, well, Judge, you know, isn't the easiest way to dismantle the system is to remove SROs? Well, yes and no. It all depends on your SRO program. Why would I want to remove an SRO program like the one that we have now developed, okay, into a national model that uses the positive student engagement for school policing, a program that actually promotes graduation, where the police officers are involved in promoting graduation, okay, all right, by not arresting. Well, where I'm going with this is I point this spike here. Why did it go up? It went up because 2008, the economy tanked. So we all had to cut our budgets. And so the police had to cut their budget. And so they cut the SROs out of the middle schools. Well, guess what happened? The SROs were not there to protect those kids. And administrators started calling 911 instead. And who did they get? A police officer from the street who did what the old SROs used to do. If there's probable cause, you made the arrest. That's why it spiked. That is proof that when you have a good SRO program, you probably might want to keep it. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this aging out. Okay. These are program referrals, restorative practices I talked about. These are kids no longer coming to the juvenile court, but now they're being referred to a restorative justice without a juvenile complaint, without being arrested, okay? And so these are, now look, in 2011, 2012, you had 420 kids who went through restorative practices and other educational programs. We only had 55 kids repeat, only 55, okay? Why were we handcuffing 420 in the old days? Think about what this evidence right here is saying, what this data is saying. It begs the question. If we only have 55 repeaters out of 420, why were we arresting all 420 in the first place? What is it about us that we feel so quick to want to put handcuffs on kids? Okay, it's really kind of sickening if you think about it. If you just stop and think about it. Okay, and here's the other thing. Oh, I meant to say on the racial, by the way, this number keeps going on down over here, all right, that we are now at a point, if there's ever been something we've been able to eliminate DMC, it's been in the school system. So a Black student today is just as likely to be arrested as a white student, not 2 times more, not 3 times more. Now up here, they were 12 times more likely to be arrested than a white student. Okay, forgot to point that out. Now here's the other thing. Remember what I said about, how go graduation rates, so go crime rates? Well, guess what? As we start reducing the school filings, okay, these are filings from the streets. Notice how they're going down. The juvenile crime rate's going down, okay? School arrests are going down. But guess what? This red line, which is, I have to put the red line in here because in 2011, 12, the United States Department of Education changed the reporting formula for graduation rates. They went from overall, in other words, if you started in 9th grade but took you 6 years instead of 4 years, you still got to count that as a successful graduation. You can't do that today. It's called the adjusted 4-year cohort, okay? You can only count the kids who graduated in 4 years. Well, guess what? Everyone's graduation rates fell to some degree, okay? Ours did quite a bit. But notice what happened. our on-time graduation rates. I mean, the graduation rates still continue to go. Imagine what the overall rates are right now. Okay, if there was that big of a drop, and our on-time kept going up. Basically, what this means is our graduation rate, since we created the School Justice Partnership, since we reformed our system, stopped detaining so many kids, particularly kids of color, because the majority of our population in Clayton County is African American. Okay, you know what this means, folks? We have more Black kids graduating high school, going on career paths, going to college like we'll lose, onto a healthier future. Why? Because we decided to turn our system upside down and do the unspeakable. Stop arresting so many. Stop bringing them into the system. Do other things with them that are help them navigate the poverty they live in. Help them break the cycle of poverty. The stuff that's more difficult to do. I get it, it's hard, but you're not going to get anywhere until you start talking about it collectively. And by the way, as I come to an end here, I got 4 minutes, is this. At the end, there's a whole series of slides that it's not part of this conversation, but I put it in there. It's about how to do this collectively in your community, okay? And by the way, Craig has it, I sent it to him. This collective decision-making approach is included in my most recent publication in the Georgia Law Review. It was published over this past summer. You can get it yourself by just Googling Georgia Law Review and look at the summer edition. Anyway, just look for Teske. It's called Georgia Juvenile Justice Reform, a collective decision-making approach to depoliticize, get this, depoliticize crime and punishment. Okay, all right. Now I got to come to a close here, so let me finish this up. There's also pre-adjudication, types of restorative programs. I won't go into it, but let me share some stuff will shock some folks, okay? Which is 3-year recidivist studies were done on our diverted youth, okay? Like I said, most of them we never see again, okay? I mean, 70% we never saw again in this 2010 recidivist study. This is a 2015 recidivist study. 26% of youth diverted in 2015 reoffended within 3 years. Only 26%. It begs the question, be careful what you do to our kids. Make sure you don't give them a chance to age out, okay? All right. When the kid commits a delinquent act but needs services somewhere else, that's our I already mentioned that. That's our quad CST. You see a picture of them there meeting, okay? All right. There's the alternatives to detention. We know about that. I won't go into detention assessment. That's the FAST panel. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they meet before detention hearings, trying to come up with a recommendation to the judge to get the kid out of jail that day on safe alternatives. We have different types of alternatives. So let me get to the end and close here. Here's the data. Impact on detention admissions. You can see how much they're down. And notice I have youth of color, okay? All right, so you see youth of color. Total admissions, youth of color. Now, you want to bring it down, okay? Try to bring as many of our kids of color, keep them out of the system, okay? This is the average daily detention population, okay? Our caseloads have gone down as a result. So that means we have far fewer kids of color on probation being sanctioned. Technical violations. Folks, we no longer issue warrants for technical violations of probation. No, we don't, okay? We have graduated responses instead. The only time we issue a warrant is if the kid has absconded for more than 24 hours. And we still have a box that says that the judge can check and say, if the kid is apprehended, return the kid home and not put into detention, all right? So we have graduated sanctions or responses. We also have a positive rewards. We reward our probationers. That's so important, okay? Our probation violations resulting in detention, you see how far they've gone down there. And I'm going really quick. Failure to appear, we no longer issue failure to appear warrants. If a kid doesn't show up in court, we no longer issue warrants for their arrest. We have FTA locators downstairs. A deputy clerk calls them, they start getting on the phone to call. Most of these kids are in school. Most of these kids didn't even know they're supposed to be in court. The parent forgot. Now, how abusive is that to issue a warrant for a kid didn't you know he's supposed to be in court? All right, come on. That doesn't take much to figure out. That's a no-brainer, okay? Then I've already mentioned the second chance program. Okay, so I need to end there. I think that our commitments are way down to the state, okay, as well. And the last thing is our delinquent arrest, our juvenile crime rates are down 82%. Most important, our felonies are down 64%. So you see all this soft stuff that we've employed has actually resulted in positive outcomes, a reduction in crime, okay? It is counterintuitive, I get it, but don't let those people out there who want to say that you have to be so tough on crime, you want to, that's never worked, okay? That's never worked. So that's all I have. I'm done. I've got my allotted time. There, Richard, I'm turning it over to you there, Mr. President.
Hey, Judge Teske, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I've had the great fortune to hear you present and talk numerous times, and I think there are always so many things I'll walk away with. One is just, gosh, he is the most passionate person I have ever met or had the opportunity to hear speak around youth justice reform. And then two, just what incredible outcomes you guys have had under your leadership and the partnerships that you have there. So look forward to continuing to think of ways that we can use what you guys have been doing in Georgia to help improve our outcomes in Tennessee as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard. Good to see you.
You too, sir. For more than 20 years, the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth has honored a child advocate with the Jim Pryor Child Advocacy Award. The award honors Jim Pryor, a child advocate who served on the Commission on Children and Youth. The commission remembers him annually by honoring a child advocate who carries on his passion for the future well-being of Tennessee's children. It is with great pleasure that we present this year's award to Sandra Allen. Sandra is one of those amazing trailblazers, having begun her career working for the Department of Children's Services in casework and providing training for DCS across the state to shift the tide to trauma-informed services for children, families, and communities, as well as the agency for which she worked. As a founding board member and former president of the Association of Infant Mental Health in Tennessee, AIMHI-TN, Sandra has been instrumental in launching Tennessee's Infant Mental Health Association and assuring the sustainability of the organization. Sandra's mentorship and influence spread across home visiting, Child Care Resource and Referral, Le Bonheur Children's Hospital, the Young Child Wellness Council, Porter Leaf, and many other organizations with statewide impact. In times of stress or conflict, Sandra consistently provides a voice of wisdom and a calming presence. She supports those with whom she works in noticing others' perspectives and returning to the heart of the issue, the needs of the children and their families. In the past 18 years, Sandra has been integral in the development of the home visiting workforce and has been instrumental in the development and leadership of the Home Visiting Leadership Alliance, which works with TCCY to promote positive outcomes of home visiting as an intervention for at-risk babies, young children, and families. This leadership within the home visiting sector led to the funding of Project Launch and the development of the Early Success Coalition. In her leadership roles, Sandra constantly pushes her teams to strive for excellence and not accept the status quo. She strives to create systems that are inclusive. She challenges communities to move out of their comfort zones, and she encourages and embraces difficult conversations. She has the wisdom, stamina, and presence to lean into the challenges and enact change, and she has supported her colleagues in doing so as well. In return, countless children and families have reaped the rewards. Her interest in the well-being of families and children, in whatever capacity she touches their life, is her driving passion. Not only have children, families, and communities benefited, but each person at Children's Advocacy Days has been touched by her work. We are honored to present Sandra Allen with the Jim Pryor Child Advocacy Award.
Good morning. I am overwhelmed with gratitude to have been selected to receive the Jim Pryor Award. When I look back over the past recipient, I am truly honored to be in a group with them. I accept this award with much gratitude and knowing that my work and accomplishments were not done alone. They were completed in collaboration with many people, many of which are here with us today. It has been a great joy and pleasure in my life to work collaboratively with my colleagues, my community, and the families that we serve. I am inspired every day by the work that you do. I'm inspired by your passion, by your compassion, and by your hard work, all the while holding the baby in mind. We will continue to do this work because we're making a difference. We are making our communities better, and we're making life better for some of our youngest and most vulnerable members. Once again, thank you very much for this honor. I am deeply touched.
Congratulations, Sandra. We're so happy to be able to recognize your outstanding service and contributions. Our next presenter this morning is Deputy Director for TennCare, Brooks Daverman. TennCare is Tennessee's Medicaid agency and covers 1.4 million Tennesseans. Brooks' responsibilities include strategy, managed care, eligibility, member services, internal audit, and human resources. In previous roles at TennCare, Brooks directed an initiative that has made Tennessee a leader in paying for value in healthcare. And before that, Brooks worked on Tennessee's implementation of the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. Brooks has a master's in public policy from Duke University, and we are so glad that he's here with us this morning to share information about TennCare and all that they are doing and all that we have to look forward to. So Brooks, thank you so much, and I'll turn over to you.
Okay, Richard, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for participating, for your interest, and certainly for all your work to meet the needs of Tennessee's children. So TennCare is Tennessee's Medicaid agency, but for Children's Advocacy Days, probably the best way to describe us is that we are the insurer for half of Tennessee's children. I'm going to talk about 4 topics today. What we are doing to improve the quality of our program, especially for children, our work to manage our fiscal impact, how we have adjusted to the pandemic, and new initiatives that we're working on. So let's start with the quality of our programs. We are always working to improve the services that we offer. One of our strategies to improve our quality is to change how we pay for healthcare, moving from paying for volume to paying for value. And we partner with providers to achieve those goals. In primary care, our strategy is called patient-centered medical home. We now have 37% of our members attributed to a patient-centered medical home, and that's even higher for our pediatricians, so for our children members. These are providers who have raised their hands to care for not just the sick people who are in their waiting room, but also to reach out to all the people attributed to their clinic and work to improve their health. And the providers are rewarded based on their results in quality and efficiency. They've been successful on both fronts. In quality measures, that includes a 7% improvement in well child visits in the first 15 months and a 20% improvement in childhood immunizations. So, and then I'll go to the next one. Another area where we are improving quality is our work against opioid use disorder. TennCare has been a leader in addressing opioids, putting new requirements around prescription opioids, and reaching out with treatment for members who suffer from opioid abuse disorder. Opioids have a very real impact on families and children. And one way that we see our progress is in the trend on neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is the condition where a baby is born addicted because it has been I'm missing my word, exposed, sorry, to opioids during the pregnancy. Neonatal abstinence syndrome births decreased by 30% from 2016 to 2019 in Tennessee. And we're the only state in the country that's reporting a continuous decline during that period. And now with the pandemic across the country, there are certainly reports of increased use of opioids and other drugs. So the encouraging progress that we've seen so far may not continue at the same rate. And that's just part of the very sad reality of the impact of the pandemic. But we know that our efforts are having an impact, and so we're not going to let up. One more item on quality. One of the best ways we have to measure quality at TennCare is what our own members say. In our most recent survey, our member satisfaction was 94%. We're very happy to maintain that high satisfaction rate among our members. And you know, customer service really matters as part of that satisfaction rate. We now have one of the most modern and customer-friendly eligibility systems of any Medicaid agency. Members can access their information online. They can use their phone to upload documents. And we connect with dozens of federal databases so that we can make automatic eligibility decisions, in many cases in real time or at least overnight. And so there's certainly a lot more we could say about quality in our program. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to my second topic, which is TennCare's fiscal impact. Tennessee is a state with a well-managed Medicaid program. We have a rate of growth in the cost of our program that is consistently below the average of other states. And that's worth celebrating. And, you know, some people might say that this audience might not be very interested in how fast the Medicaid budget is increasing. But I think that you all are exactly the right audience for this information, because managing our budget actually is the reason we are able to achieve those improvements in quality I just mentioned. And more than that, many of the things you've heard about from all the speakers might not be possible in a state with higher increases in the Medicaid budget. You know, think about it this way. If TennCare had tracked equal to national Medicaid trends, we would have had to spend about $2 billion more since 2012. And $2 billion is actually about the same amount as the record additional investments that Tennessee has made in K through 12 education during that time period. So that doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. And so we certainly don't want to be average. And we really don't have the luxury of being an average Medicaid state. TennCare is 19.7% of state funds in the budget. So we need a stable TennCare budget to be able to afford other key items we care about, including and especially those that impact children. And this year, our proposed increase in our medical costs is less than 2%. So I'll move now to talk about a topic that is on everybody's mind most of the time. And as you might expect at TennCare, we've been spending most of the past year responding to COVID. One of the things we worry about with children is that their routine and preventive care could be disrupted by the pandemic. We know that many people are staying away from the doctor's office, and really any public place. So we worked with pediatricians to create guidance for how they could use telehealth for pediatric well child visits. And we opened up telehealth to all provider types. In the first months of the pandemic, we saw a sharp decline in pediatric well child visits, also in pediatric outpatient services, pediatric dental services, and pediatric pharmacy fills. But more recently, we've seen some improvement in those measures. Not everything is back to normal, but actually, when you look at pediatric well child visits, our data shows that the number of visits from June through October of last year was slightly higher than the previous year, and that's encouraging. And the reason I use that time period is there's a significant lag in the data that we get because some providers don't submit their bills immediately. So that's the most recent information that we have that's complete. Okay, so at this time, or at the beginning of the pandemic, we knew that many providers were dealing with loss of revenue and increases in the cost of providing care because of PPE and other precautionary measures. So we sincerely appreciate really the heroic work of our providers over the past year. And we needed to support them to make sure our members continued to have access to care. Initially, the federal support for providers was mostly for those who had Medicare members. And so we focused our efforts on providers who served our members. And that's primarily primary care, home and community-based services, dentists, nursing facilities, and hospitals. We worked with these providers to find flexibilities where that would be helpful to them. We made accelerated payments, and we also made direct financial relief available to these providers. Also, through our managed care organizations, we have done a lot of outreach to our members to make sure that they were getting needed healthcare, that they had what they needed more in general, helping them get tested when they had been exposed to COVID. And now we're helping to connect our members to the vaccine when they're eligible. And so I am pleased to address, now I'll move to my last topic, which is the current initiatives that we're working on. And there are several to talk about. Probably all of you have heard about the modified block grant waiver for TennCare, also known as TennCare 3, sometimes also referred to as the shared savings plan. I won't go into all the details today, but I do want to tell you about what it means for Tennessee, especially because there's some misinformation out there about what this waiver does. We're actually in TennCare 3 right now. It started in January. And the reason that there was no real change is because we didn't need to do anything differently when we moved into this waiver, because it largely preserves the same waiver authorities we have now, or we had previously, but with some additional benefits, especially the potential for shared savings. So earlier I was talking about how management of TennCare has saved the state money, but most of the savings actually goes to the federal government. And it seems backward that the federal government rewards states that spend the most on healthcare with additional federal dollars. But with our new waiver, if we're able to maintain our low trends, then we can earn shared savings. That's a great deal for Tennessee. And there are some features that I think you all will really appreciate. There are quality measures we have to meet in order to access shared savings. There's an adjustment for population changes beyond 1%. So savings is not going to be based on how many people we cover. And we know that if we maintain our current trends, we will get shared savings. So we don't have to make big cuts. And the governor has committed that we will use these shared savings to address healthcare needs. But block grant is only one of our current initiatives. I'll mention 4 others that are all about increasing coverage and increasing benefits, and all are helping children. First, the governor has proposed this year to extend coverage for new mothers. Currently, and this is the case for most states, there's a redetermination of eligibility for Medicaid 2 months after a member gives birth. And most of these women remain eligible for TennCare after those 2 months, but not all do. And that's a critical time in a new mother's life, and also a critical time for her child. So this is an important step. We're going to extend to 1 year, and it's going to make a difference for children and their mothers. And we're really pleased to be able to support that proposal. Second, we are also proposing to offer dental coverage to pregnant and postpartum women. We already provide dental coverage to children, but a mother's dental health matters for her and matters for her baby as well. Okay, so the scientific term for this is vertical transmission, but I'll tell you how I think of it. And lots of you are going to recognize the situation. When a baby doesn't want to eat something, right? So doesn't want to eat the oatmeal or the vegetables, what does a parent do? Well, right, you got to take that first bite and show just how good it is. And babies are paying attention. You know, you can't fake this. You have to actually put it in your mouth. And then, you know, the spoon goes in, it's going to pick up bacteria from the mother. The next bite is going into the baby's mouth. So that's vertical transmission. And dental coverage for moms is going to make a wonderful impact there. The third of these initiatives I'd like to talk to you about is the Katie Beckett program. So on November 23rd, in partnership with the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, we opened up enrollment for children who have significant disabilities or complex medical needs, regardless of the family's income. We've worked hard over the past year to design this program to make sure that it met the needs of these children and their families. And if you've ever interacted with any family like this, then you know that these parents sacrifice everything for their children. And their children are wonderful individuals who are full of love. And normal health insurance does not come close to covering some of the medical needs of these children. So we are pleased to be able to support these children and their families. We currently have over 450 children enrolled. And my last item to close on is that the governor's budget also proposes to extend coverage to adopted children throughout their childhood. This is going to remove a barrier to adoption, and it's going to support families who are opening themselves to a child in need. So at TennCare, we're working to maintain and improve the quality of our services. We're managing our budget because we know that nothing else is possible if our costs grow too quickly. We're working every day to respond to COVID, and we have new initiatives to increase coverage and benefits that we're very excited to support this legislative season. So thank you very much for your attention and for all the work that you do on behalf of Tennessee's children.
Thank you, Brooks. We so appreciate you being with us and sharing those updates from TennCare, including talking through the waiver. I know that can be complicated for some people, and so I especially appreciate that. Also, through my involvement with home visiting programs, I'm really excited about the governor's proposals to extend coverage for new moms and the dental coverage piece as well. Just great public policy. So thank you again, and we really appreciate you being a part of Children's Advocacy Days this year.
Thank you very much. Very happy to do it.
Thanks. All right, so I think we're going to shift a little bit to talk about one of the youth programs that we have been able to enjoy this week. First, I want to echo what Richard said on Tuesday about how important we know it is for children and youth to have opportunities to be supported and engaged in their communities. And we're so fortunate to have many programs that provide those opportunities all across the state. In fact, many of you are part of why those programs are even possible. So thank you for what you do. I want to take a moment to tell you about the Theater Bug here in Nashville. I had the great fortune to meet Corey Lamel, who is their founder and artistic director. And her incredible passion for the arts, and especially her commitment and dedication to the children in the program, is just so evident. She literally lights up when she talks about it. She talks about former participants who are now adults and the meaningful connections and relationships she still has with many of them. And we know how important those connections are for our children and youth. So I want to thank her and the Theater Bug for sharing their performances with us so we could enjoy them this week. And I'd like to watch a video so that we can learn a little bit more about them. Thanks.
The Theater Bug is a 501c3 nonprofit arts education program that opened its doors in 2011. Those doors have been a little unconventional. They have looked like a stage in a cafeteria in a senior center. They have been in a tiny room behind a restaurant. They have been in a strip mall next to the Save-A-Lot, and most recently in the gymnasium in the back of a church. I feel like we have been able to create the most magical spaces out of the most unlikely places. The Theater Bug does original plays and musicals based on social issues that are affecting our community right now. We've done plays about grief, social media, bullying, depression and suicide, adoption, children with special needs, trans youth, children who are facing long-term illness, empathy. Really important things that are affecting the kids we know, but also all the people in our community.
It's not just a children's theater. In fact, it's a theater that just happens to be made up of mostly kids.
I like being in Theater Bug shows because all of the characters speak to me in their own way. And each and every character has helped me move through my life.
Through the scripts that they get to do at Theater Bug, they're learning about empathy. They're learning about connection. They're learning how to better love one another and how to be a better member of our society.
Stories that actually change myself, that actually change audiences. It's so empowering to know that I'm part of a movement and a community like that.
I've seen how the power of music and dance and drama can give these kids confidence and give them a space to just completely be themselves. So I started off as a student, then I went to college, and then now I've got to combine my passions for theater and teaching, but also the special needs community. And so now I'm working with individuals with disabilities and getting them plugged in at the Bug.
I brought Kinston to audition for the winter concert, and after Kinston's audition, Corey asked to meet Tice, and she met Tice. And so my first experience with the Theater Bug was one that said to me, we love everybody, we want everybody, and everybody's welcome. Theater Bug is so much more than great shows. It's kindness and it's love. Loving people for just being humans, and those are values that are being reinforced in my children, and that's such a joy.
Corey has created an environment where she wants every child to be able to come and learn, be immersed in the art, and then grow from that as a human being. To do that, you want the best educators working with these children. You want the best environment around them where they can be safe and come and feel like they can be the best version of themselves. All of that takes money.
I value what they're doing at the Bug because when it's all said and done and when they reach adulthood and when they're launched into this world, they are going with full hearts.
At the heart of the Bug, we know that it is so much more than just arts education. It is, for a lot of us, home.
To be a character on stage and tell a story, it's just one of the best things in the world. This is something that Miss Corey has said that has really stuck with me, and this will stick with me regardless of who I'm playing. I could be playing somebody that this could be someone's real life story.
The Theater Bug needs a space to exist. They need a space to be able to grow into. Every year we get more and more children in our program. Every time we have auditions, there are quicker and quicker signups for these shows because everybody's excited to be a part of what has been created and what continues to really grow at the Theater Bug.
It's important for us to constantly recognize the value of things, specifically in the arts, that make our life richer. And the whole point of it being nonprofit is that it is not going to be done for just business purposes. It is here for the heart and it is here for the community. And it takes that community and their hearts to come together and move mountains to keep it.
The Theater Bug is just such a warm and welcome place, and I just love it so much.
Because of the Bug, I've learned to be a better actor and a better human.
Because of the Bug, I am able to create courage for myself and courage for anyone who needs it.
Because of the Bug, I can be myself and I could be free and feel like I am where I'm meant to be.
We know that a home is so much more than a building, but we also believe that it is time for the Theater Bug to have a structure that is as beautiful as our family.
What amazing work, and what inspirational young folks using arts and after school programming and activity to learn more, be more, and share more. So thank you so much for our partners at Theater Bug. We appreciate having the opportunity to highlight what you're doing, but also having the opportunity to enjoy and learn from the young folks as well. I hope you all have enjoyed today and the presentations as much as I did. Today feels like there was a lot of really important and really dense information that we received, and so I know that we're all going to continue to process the lessons and messages from today. I hope you'll make plans to join us again tomorrow as we close out Children's Advocacy Days 2021. It's so surreal. Like I said when we started, it seems like we just finished CAD 2020. And then all of a sudden, here we are finishing CAD 2021. Tomorrow, we look forward to hearing from Commissioner Penny Schwinn and Dr. Danielle LaSure with the Department of Education. We look forward to hearing from Commissioner Brad Turner with the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. For those of you that have been at Children's Advocacy Days for many years, you know that this is a new addition to the speakers, but they are doing so much relevant work that it just makes sense to give them the opportunity for us to hear more about what they are doing as well. We will also be hearing from 3 legislators, and you'll receive an update about child care services, which we all are painfully aware of and front and center of needs in Tennessee right now. We look forward to being with you all again tomorrow. And again, thank you just so much for carving out the morning to be with us. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So thank you and have a nice afternoon.